Hi Team Value, JJ here, welcome back. Well, today we're going to look at an update of Mohnish Pabrai's Pabrai Wagons fund. He's just come out with a semi-annual report and it's got an updated stock list, and he's bought some stocks for the fund. There's 20 stocks in that fund now, which is an increase from last time, and we'll see what he's bought. He's bought PayPal and other stocks, so let's get straight into it. First of all, it's worth looking quickly at what Mohnish said here about the Pabrai Wagons fund. He said the fund's investments reflect 4 core allocations, which account for 76% of the portfolio at the moment. Number 1 is Turkish workhorses like Coca-Cola, Isaac. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce these right, so I won't even try, but that's a global Coke bottler based in Turkey that operates in 11 countries, Anadolu, which is Turkey's biggest beer brand, and TAV Airports, a Turkish airport operator that operates airports in 8 countries. He's talked about this in recent videos. For about 8 or 10 minutes, he talked about TAV Airports in the last video. I may go more in depth into some of these in upcoming videos, but today we're just going to do a survey of what's been bought. Now, the Art of Value Patreon members have got a preview of this. I just did a video in the weekend. I just laid eyes on it and I wanted to do a video straight away. So there's quite a long preview of this, but I thought I'd do a public video. If there's interest in this video, I'll do some follow-up videos as well. So number 2 is US coal, which includes thermal and metallurgical coal plays like Consol Energy, Alpha Metallurgical Resources, Warrior Met Coal, and Arch Resources. I've been through those in a previous video. And number 3 is US car dealerships, including Asbury Automotive and AutoNation. So those are new as a group in the portfolio. And number 4, North America Europe Tech, including Microsoft, Amazon, Constellation Software, Topicus, and Tiny. So there's some really interesting buys in there. We'll get into those. Some of them are big, some of them are small. Well, the biggest company in the world, Microsoft, if it is that at the moment, I haven't checked. So still keen on some of those Mag 7 stocks, and Constellation Software. If you don't know what that is, I've made videos about that before. And a spin-off of Constellation is Topicus. Constellation, Topicus, and Tiny are actually all serial acquirer companies of software. So that's a theme there. Okay, so here's the 20 stock portfolio at present. And we can see the allocations here, which some of them are quite different. We can see the Coca-Cola bottler in Turkey there is number 1 with 10%. And Anadolu number 2, which is 9.7%. Another Turkish company, the beer bottler there, the beer company. And Consol Energy, which is the coal company, 9.2. Alpha Metallurgical Resources, 8.5. TAV Airports there, 7.7. He's talked about that, as I said, in a recent video. Warrior Met Coal, another coal company, 4.4. Arch Resources, yet another coal company, 4.1. So quite high there, conviction in the coal. And Microsoft Corp at number 8. So less in conviction, but all about the same. So Microsoft Corp, which is kind of a surprise that he bought Microsoft. He has talked about that in recent videos, his admiration for Microsoft, how it looks. It's still a vibrant company that's growing and doing new things based around AI. Of course, that's the latest thing where it has that partnership, or has part ownership in OpenAI. So that's probably a big part of the thesis. And Constellation Software, number 9 at 3.3%. Of course, that's a serial acquirer of software companies headed by Mark Leonard, who's been compounding at a high rate for decades. We'll have a look at some of these companies just quickly and see how they've done over time. And I'll probably go into it in other videos, in future videos, into these in a bit more in depth. And so Spirit Airlines, which is a surprise, and that's 3.3%. I think that's a value play. Some of these are value plays and some of these are long-term compounders. Obviously, Constellation Software has been a huge compounder over time. I think it's gone 100x already. So it's a big company. He has talked about looking for smaller companies that are long-term compounders, but he did say at one point, Constellation Software, that he didn't own it, and he said that might have been a mistake that he didn't own it, and he has bought it in for this fund. So he thinks that it can still keep compounding, obviously can keep compounding for a long time, even though it's a large cap already. Brookfield Corp, which is headed by Bruce Flatt, whose value investing philosophy, value investing bent. Bruce Flatt's talked about that. I did a video, which I'll put in the description, of Bruce Flatt, where he talked about the current situation, or a few months ago now, it was last year. And his value investing philosophy does come out in everything that he says. Brembo, which is partly to do with auto parts, 3.3%, is an Italian company. Asbury Automotive Group from America. AutoNation, which is another in the auto group, 3.2%. First Citizens Bank shares, which is a surprise that he's bought into a bank. I have looked in previous videos, Li Lu buying a regional bank, East West Bancorp, and Mohnish Pabrai has gone for First Citizens Bank shares. And I just wonder if he has looked at what Li Lu has been doing and then looked in that regional sector as well. He calls himself a shameless cloner, so that often means looking at what other super investors are doing and then diving into the sector. I just wonder if he had looked at what Li Lu was doing and then looked in that sector and found a different bank. So PayPal Holdings, of course, there comes in at number 17, 3.2%. So the big retail favorite at the moment, and also a favorite of a super investor like Mohnish Pabrai, even though the allocation's a lot lower than it is for these top Turkish holdings. And then we have Topicus at number 18, which is a spin-off from Constellation Software, the same business model as Constellation, which has managed to compound over time, but in Europe. And Tiny Limited, which is another serial acquirer of small software companies in Canada this time. So that's the same place that Constellation Software is from, same model. What I understand here is that both Bill Ackman and Howard Marks, those super investors, are invested in Tiny, and now Mohnish Pabrai is. So I just wonder again, being a shameless cloner, if that's what got him interested in Tiny as well. I've done a video about Tiny with Andrew Wilkinson, is the head of Tiny, and it goes into his backstory there. There are quite a lot of podcasts out there about Andrew Wilkinson as well, and the Tiny story, but I might go into that again at some other time. And 20th, last but not least, is eBay. Well, maybe it is least because it looks like he's sold some down here. It's only 0.8% allocation. I think part of the thesis there was their buybacks. It's not particularly growing very much, but I think that was the thesis, but he seems to have lost conviction a little bit in that, or it's lower than the other ones. I just wonder if that'll disappear from the portfolio altogether. We'll have to wait and see until next time. But now let's have a look at some of these companies just quickly and see why he might have bought into some of these companies. Now, if you're getting value out of this Mohnish Pabrai Wagons Fund episode so far, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button to help the algorithm to spread it to more people. Thanks. Now, seeing there's a lot of companies, I'm going to go through them pretty quickly here. In future videos, I may dive more in depth into some of them if there's interest. So let me know in the comments if you're interested in any of them. And this one is the Coca-Cola bottler from Turkey. And as we can see here, well, look at this. So over the last 3 years, it's up 686%. And it's a 99% KGA. And Mohnish Pabrai has bought it really recently for this fund. And over the 5 years, we can see it's up nearly 2,000%, and that's an 82% KGA. But if we look at just the past year, it's up 196%, and year to date, it's up 6.5%. So this stock's been doing incredibly well. He obviously thinks there's still a lot of compounding in it. One thing that he said in recent videos about the stocks in Turkey is that he's bought blue chip assets there. The macro situation in Turkey has been pretty bad. And I think it reminds me, as I said in the other video that I did for Patreon members, it reminds me of the investor Nick Sleep, who went in and bought assets in Zimbabwe when that country was seemed to be collapsing or in a lot of trouble. And I think he bought a concrete company, assets like that, and as it improved, it did well because it was such deep value, even though seemingly risky. Obviously, Turkey's got 40% interest rates. They put interest rates up to try and get the inflation down, sort of runaway inflation. And what's interesting here, if we change to US dollars, the situation changes because of the currency. So over the past 3 years, it's 81% price, and over 5 years, it's 249%. Mohnish Pabrai has explained in videos that he's bought companies there that rely on overseas currency. He talked about Racist in his other portfolio. This is his other portfolio here. The biggest position is Racist from Turkey. It's a warehouse owner. He said that the clients are companies like Amazon, that's sort of safer and blue chip assets, and I think that's the situation here. He has said that if the macro situation changes in Turkey, that these Turkish stocks could get another lift, but his thesis for each company doesn't rely on that. So this is Anadolu, another Turkish stock. together with its subsidiaries, engages in the production, bottling, marketing, distribution, and sale of beer, malt, and non-alcoholic beverages worldwide. The company operates in 3 segments: turkey, beer, international beer, and soft drinks. So another bottler, another drinks company. So he thinks this is another blue chip asset. If we go to GuruFocus here, I'll put links in the description to both GuruFocus and Ticker if you want to check those out. Some of the metrics here are pretty good, and the P ratio is still pretty low at 10.17. Forward P ratio is nearly 11 there. The ROCE in particular is 24. And this is TAV Airports, which he's spoken about in a recent video in some length. It's had 95.9% rise over the past 3 years. That's a 25.4% CAGR. This is in US dollars, and 5 years it's 23.4%. So this is the US stock on the OTC market, or not in Turkey. I think there's some brokers that allow buying in Turkey, some US brokers, but I'm not sure. Having a big fund and going to Turkey and knowing people there, obviously it's easier for him to buy in Turkey than say retail investors. But this stock, I think, is on the OTC market. So we can see over the past 3 years, it's 25.4% CAGR, which is pretty good. TAV Holdings, together with its subsidiaries, constructs terminal buildings and manages and operates terminals and airports in Turkey, Georgia, Tunisia, Macedonia, Latvia, Oman, Spain, Saudi Arabia, and internationally. So it's an airport builder and operator, as I understand it. And next comes Microsoft down the allocation. Obviously, we can see Microsoft's had a 21% CAGR over the last 3 years, been doing very well, and Mohnish Pabrai obviously thinks that it's going to still do well. I don't think we need to dwell on Microsoft. I think we all know what that is. The PE ratio is 37.65 at the moment, and the forward PE is 31, so pretty high for him buying, but he obviously thinks that it's got a lot of legs in it left yet, which is really interesting to see. Constellation Software is another one which, you know, the valuation isn't exactly cheap, but it never is cheap. This has been a long-term compounder, which has only been cheap at times when, say, there's been a market crash, really. And so, say, look at this 5 years, it's had a 26.8 CAGR, compound annual growth rate. That's so good. And over 10 years, over 30%. And if we go back to all, it's had a 34.4% CAGR over a very long time. And Mohnish Pabrai obviously thinks that it can keep doing that, even though the market cap is getting up there. It's 79 billion Canadian dollars right now. So that's definitely a large cap, not a small cap. Can they keep compounding at that high rate? Next comes Spirit Airlines, and we can see here that this is obviously a value play. We can see that the PE ratio is 4, just over 4. The figures don't look so good there. It's $471 million market cap, so not a huge company. So I would say that he's thinking that this is deep value. The GuruFocus says it's a value trap here, but Pabrai does not think it is, obviously. Next comes Brookfield Corporation, which I mentioned. Bruce Flatt as the CEO and leader of that, who has a value investing philosophy. This is Brembo from Italy. We can see here that the metrics are pretty good for this. The gross margin 55, operating margin 10. Brembo designs, develops, and produces and sells braking systems and components for cars, motorbikes, and industrial vehicles and machinery. So definitely in the auto sector there. Pabrai's talked about this, that he thinks that the car makers are not good investments, but the car dealerships and other aspects of the auto industry, he thinks that there's value there, and he's showing that by his buys here. Now, Asbury Automotive Group, another one we can see here that operates an automotive retailer in the United States. It offers a range of automotive products and services. And we can see here the performance of the stock over the last 3 years, 16.9% CAGR. And over 5 years, 26.4%. Over 10 years, 16. So it has performed well over the long term, this company, which has a market cap of $4.2 billion. If we look at some of these metrics, we can see that they're fairly good. And the P ratio is 7.16 at the moment. So another value play there. But a company that seems to be quality and has performed well over the long term. This is not investment advice, and I haven't looked any deeper into these companies yet. This is just a quick look at each one. So Amazon, we know Amazon, of course, one of the Mag 7. Probably seen a thesis for Amazon over and over again, so we won't dwell on that. AutoNation, which we can see here, the 5 year, it's up 32.1% compound annual growth rate, which is very impressive. Over 10 years, it's 11. We can see here it's at a steep rise really since 2020, but Mohnish Pabrai buying this recently, so still thinking that there's value in it. Over the past year, it's up 17.5%. So AutoNation operates an automotive retailer in the United States, again in that auto sector. The PE ratio is 6.85, so looking like another value play there, with the ROCE is over 25, so really good return on capital there, and the PE ratio low, so that's probably why he's interested in that. Just from that first look, I can see why he might be interested without knowing any more than just looking at this at this point. First Citizen Bank shares over 3 years, it's had a 22% CAGR. The share price over 5 years, 30. So this has done very well. We can see here the kind of inflection point, March 2023. It's up since then. And so Pabrai obviously thinks that this will keep doing well. And just have a quick look here, we can see that these return on equity, return on assets are pretty high. And the PE ratio is 1.95. So people who are with, banks and financial companies in their circle of competence, I think this would probably be well worth having a look at. And PayPal, of course, we get to PayPal. We can see there's been a lot of talk about PayPal recently, and it's down to a PE ratio of 16.37, forward PE ratio of just over 12 at this point. And as I said, it's a retail investor favorite. There's a lot of people betting on this to go up like Meta did, and Mohnish Pabrai obviously thinks it will too. I've done a video on PayPal before. It's something I'm not interested in, partly because of the market cap. I'm just looking for smaller caps, and I think there's a lot of competition in the space, even though PayPal's been around a long time. That's the reason I'm not interested in it, but you might be, and obviously Mohnish Pabrai is, so who am I to go against what he thinks? But it's not for me. Now here's Topicus, the spin-off from Constellation Software, which I've made videos about before in relation to Constellation Software. It hasn't been public for very long, going back to February 2021, and it's up 86.8% since then. And if it takes the same trajectory as Constellation Software, it should do very well over the long term, but we'll have to wait and see. It's had a roller coaster ride. People got excited after the IPO, so it really hasn't been public for very long, and we'll have to see how it goes over time. It's a $7 billion company at this point, which is it's getting fairly large already, really, for a small cap. It's not really a small cap anymore. That's getting to mid cap status. Tiny Limited, another serial acquirer company, which has had some changes over time. You really need to dig into this to find out. I've done a video about that. If you want to look at that, I'll put that in the description. I may do more in the future about Tiny. As I said, a serial acquirer company. I find it really fascinating that Pabrai has bought into this at this time. And I think that Howard Marks and Bill Ackman are both investors. It's sort of pocket change for them investing in a company like this. As such a small cap, it's well under $1 billion, this company, in terms of market cap. Here it says it's a venture capital and private equity firm specializing in buyouts, majority and minority investment. It prefers to invest in the technology centers. Not all of them are technology. I think it owns AeroPress, the coffee company. Andrew Wilkinson, the head, seems to be keen to branch out of software at some point, but really another serial acquirer of small companies. Over time, they should probably buy quite a lot of them. And so the market cap right now is 306 million. So still, this is definitely a small cap, still a small company, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens over time. And of course, eBay, I think part of the share buybacks is part of the thesis for this. Over 1 year, it's up 20.7% actually, but over 3 years down. So we'll have to see what happens with eBay. And there are some of the metrics for eBay. P ratio is 10. So that's pretty low compared to a lot of tech companies in the US at the moment. Perhaps he was interested from that point of view, and the buybacks over time. And the other metrics here, the gross margins, some of these metrics are looking pretty good. And the ROCE is also high, so I can see why he initially was interested in eBay at this time. So what are your thoughts on Mohnish Pabrai's buys here as new buys in the portfolio for the Wagons fund? What do you think of them? Let me know in the comments. If you have thoughts on any of the stocks that we've mentioned today, I'd really like to know. Okay, if you're watching this video on YouTube, I'm going to put a link here to a previous Mohnish Pabrai episode about the circling the wagons, where he's talking about the philosophy behind that. And here I'm going to put a previous video about the Wagons fund, the previous buys, including when he bought eBay. So go and see either of those now if you want to. And thanks to everybody for watching or listening, and I'll see you in the next one.